Challenges, sorry, that didn't come up too clear. Some of the external challenges I'm dealing with: communication, language is a big one, local infrastructure, vendor conflicts I mentioned earlier. Cultural considerations is an interesting one. How we do things with medicine is much different than how they experience medicine internationally as well. We'll do a live video call, and typically a patient encounter is between a patient and their physician, usually. If you go to the UAE, for example, and we'll do a live video call where our team of doctors are there to speak with their team of doctors about a patient, in the back of the auditorium is the entire patient's family, because they want to hear what's going on. They want to know what's about. And it's a cultural thing, you know? So you've got to be very careful about that you know, when you consider these types of things. It's not just the everyday experiences we have here in the US. You've got local legal issues a little bit as well. And time zones. Geez, time zones burns me every single year. We now change our clocks. We've already done it. I'm sorry, Europe has already changed their clocks. We haven't changed ours yet. So we'll be changing it in a few weeks. Some countries don't change their clocks. So time zones is one that you have to keep in mind in. I also put customs and shipping. I had a project, actually, the picture here is a project I did a number of years ago where we had a physician that actually was the medical director of an ultra marathon. An ultra marathon is a marathon a day for 5 days, and then the 6th day is a double marathon. And so what we did is we actually got these T-shirts from a company out in California that monitored heart rate, blood pressure, and respiratory information. And then we also put on some GPS watches as well on them. I also shipped out a mobile video conference unit packed up in a Pelican briefcase with a satellite dish. All you do is you take the dish, you point it up, and when it goes green, you have connectivity there. We were going to test it out. This was actually in the Sahara Desert. The Egyptian government actually held it hostage in customs and wanted 25% of the value of the box to let it out. So I learned a lot about customs and shipping as well with these technologies. Oh, they survived. Yeah, I'm not sure if I got a picture or not. But what's fascinating about it is that the crowd that's actually doing the race, I think the oldest finisher, I think, was 67, 68 years old. So it's a fascinating...
When he started, he was 25.
Yeah, good point. Well said. Overcoming your barriers. Create these partnerships, these relationships, have relationships with your clients, understand who they are and what they're about. It's not about Big Brother pushing something out to them. It's a partnership. Understand your client, but more so understand their culture. Understand how they work, their work week. The UAE, for example, they're off on Friday and Saturday. I think Saudi Arabia is off Thursday and Friday. So you got to know your work week. You got to know when they're available, things like that. Incentivize your users, and that's an interesting one. It isn't always about how much money can I make off of this. It's also the opportunities around other aspects that could encourage individuals to participate. Research, especially at Hopkins, is a big buzz. You know, all of a sudden now I can offer to a physician access to patients, part of a clinical trial that he or she may never have access to prior to this. And telemedicine can engage that. So all of a sudden your population as part of your study can really expand. Be non-threatening, be complementary, make it part of the program. Don't make it to change your program or make it a threat to someone else's program. And show that return on investment, and that will remain a big challenge. One other thing I didn't put up here as well is I think, especially on the academic medical side of things, is research and the data and the integrity around the data as well. We can tell great stories over and over again, but in order for big change to happen, you have to have the research connected to it. Be patient, manage the expectations. Some of my lessons learned, expect problems. There will be a sandstorm in the UAE. It will take down your data communications. Be adaptable, be flexible. You've got to deal with what you have on the ground to work with. But try to plan for the longevity of your program. You can't just think about this as a pilot done for 2 weeks. It was fun and that's it. Think about the longer term of the program. With any program, be clear about your goals and your objectives. You can't do it all at once. You must include the local experts both local and abroad. To engage in this process. It's got to become very organic. we've been doing these tumor boards for about 2 years now. I could have written a nice little paragraph on they should do tumor boards 5, 6, 7 years ago, but they're not going to do it. But why it is taking off now is because there's a relationship. Our doctors travel there, their doctors travel here. There's a connection, and they organically have started to say, hey, let's do more. So it's one thing about the experts that you want to engage with them. Don't forget the daylight savings time, and you also should market and promote the successes of a program. My boss often says to me, well, was telemedicine a solution looking for a problem? And there's plenty of problems in the healthcare sector that we have right now. But some of the global problems that we're dealing with are the pandemic flu that we're all preparing for, SARS, Hurricane Katrina, the Asian earthquake. Bioterrorism is one that I think we're all concerned about and planning on, being prepared for, I should say. Global economics. And then some things that are happening more locally, areas of acute care response, for example, stroke, chronic disease management, and then physician shortages are ones that are also sort of these real-time problems that we're challenged with and telemedicine can play a role in. That's sort of Hopkins today. The small little triangle there where everything's coming out of it is definitely the hub and spoke approach right now with most of our services, but I really want to go to this. I want the folks in the UAE to connect to our folks in Beirut, and I want them to have that same kind of interaction that we have with the folks in Chile, because the folks in the UAE and the folks in Beirut might be dealing with healthcare issues a lot more different than what they would learn just coming out of the Hopkins from the Hopkins hub. So each of these places needs to become a hub of their own, and the technology can really make that happen. This is from the Gartner Consulting Group. If you haven't seen it, it's a great little slide that I used often. This really is sort of what we deal with technology as we implement. You start with the technology trigger, that new gadget, that new device. I don't know how many of you saw an article that probably came out 3 days after the iPad was released. The iPad will change healthcare. Nobody even touched an iPad, no one have looked at an iPad, but the iPad will. So that's with that little trigger. Then there's this peak of inflated expectations that often happens, where the iPad is going to change everything, and man, very quickly you fall into that trough of disillusionment, because it's just not doing exactly what you want to do. Why? Because the rest of the network's not up to speed, because your enterprise isn't set and ready to go. But then eventually over time you find that slope of enlightenment. You find out how these technologies can impact day to day, how these technologies can be utilized to really make changes. It won't be where you really thought it was day one, but you are going to find that eventual slope, and then you'll find that plateau of productivity.